What's going on, guys, and welcome back to WWE Network and Chill, where every single week I, Graham Jason Matthews, break down all the original content that I watch on the WWE Network. I only got my Total Bellas review up from Monday up on, I think, Friday or Saturday. I think late Friday night. So this edition of Network and Chill is also delayed, reviewing the WWE 24 special on the Hardy Boys entitled Woken that aired after the Money in the Bank pay-per-view about a week ago at this point. So I'm super behind on watching it. I saw all the praise, all the critical acclaim for the documentary on Twitter and on Facebook and all these other places. People have been really digging it, and I love the Hardy Boys. You guys know that. Saturday, actually, June 23rd, yesterday, actually marked the 6-year anniversary of when I met Matt Hardy for the first time. Now, Matt Hardy has always been one of my biggest inspirational icons, and I really felt I could relate to a lot of the stuff he was going through. What was talked about in this documentary back in 2011, 2010, 2012, and all those other things he was encountering at that point in time. So this documentary really hit home for me personally, but I really enjoyed the Matt aspect of it, the Jeff aspect, coming back to WWE at WrestleMania 33, which I was there for, which is amazing to kind of relive on this documentary. But also, before we get started here, what I really liked about this documentary was that it really was nothing like anything we have ever seen in the Hardy Boys before. Now, I just reviewed the Hardy Boys DVD. They just released about a month and a half ago at this point, in early May. It really wasn't a documentary. It was more of a 3-disc compilation DVD chronicling the best of the Hardy Boys from their time in WWE. Now, that also featured TNA footage talking about their broken personas, going to TNA, which was really amazing. And now, it's kind of crazy. In the last month and a half alone, we've heard so much about TNA in WWE, not really on TV, that one mentioned by Kurt Angle on the night after WrestleMania on Raw, but rather on the network. We saw footage from the Global Wrestling Network on Table for Three, then on the Something Else to Wrestle Bruce Pritchard podcast, on the AJ Styles episode a few weeks ago, and now this, the 24 special on the Hardy Boys. Now, you could not do this documentary without footage and without talking about TNA. So again, we've seen documentaries like this before on Matt and on Jeff. They had, I know, one come out many years ago entitled like Twist of Fate or something like that. I'm not really sure what that covered. It might be on the network. I don't think I ever saw that. So it merely might talk about their upbringing in the business and stuff like that. I'm not 100% sure. The Jeff Hardy one they came out with back in 2009, which I just reviewed a few months ago, talked about Jeff's personal problems in the early mid-2000s and leaving WWE. This also talks about that, but this documentary really wastes no time in talking about the issues they dealt with, both Matt and Jeff, once they left WWE in 2009 and 2010, respectively. And again, like I said, they came out with another Hardy Boys documentary, or DVD rather, a few months ago. Really was much less of a documentary, and it was more of the best of the Hardy Boys from the last 15-20 years. So anyway, this documentary kicks off with them talking about, as I mentioned, their upbringing in the business as kids and what they've kind of dealt with in their road to becoming professional wrestlers, talking about their roots as backyard wrestlers before breaking into WWE. The song featured here is called Higher by Human. Jeff Hardy even says, as long as we believe in this, something's going to happen, talking about their road to getting to WWE, believing that there was an opportunity there. And of course, as you guys probably know, before they officially signed their contracts with WWE in the late 1990s, there was a point for a very long time where they were being used as enhancement talent for the likes of like Razor Ramon and other job guys on Raw and on Superstars and on wrestling, all the fucking Saturday night shows, Saturday morning shows and stuff like that. They were always being featured as like lower level enhancement guys before finally breaking into the business in the late 90s. So all the while, I love this here because, again, they don't really talk about their upbringing for too much, because we've heard all about this before in all the other aforementioned documentaries. We've already heard about it a million times before, so there really is no point in reliving it here, rehashing information we already know. So they kind of take everything we already know about the Hardy Boys from their first few stints in WWE, from like the 90s to the 2000s stuff, and they include it all in one video package, which I thought was great. Matt even says, for us, it was real to come up with some things creatively that people had never seen before. But in doing that, like in their matches and stuff he's talking about, but in doing that, they talk about the toll that it took on their bodies. Going out there doing crazy shit week after week after week, night after night after night, jumping off of steel cages, jumping off of ladders, going through tables, jumping off of stages, and stuff like that. And after a while, it started to take its toll, both on Matt and Jeff, even after they had broken off in a singles competition, even in the late 2000s. Big Show, who's featured quite heavily throughout this documentary, talks about Jeff Hardy being in pain in 2009. He recalls an incident where it was towards the end of Jeff's run at that point, right before he left at the tail end of 2009, where he recalls Jeff Hardy being just laid out on a bus right before he wrapped up his run in WWE. And he asked him, like, Jeff, are you okay? And Jeff was like, yeah, no, I'm fine. I'm in a lot of pain, but I'll be okay. And it was around that point that Jeff started taking pain pills and started abusing them, which was what kind of left to him leaving WWE in 2009. In addition to being burned out, of course, but it was the pain pills and the drugs and stuff that he really started to abuse, and he knew it was time to go. This would also become a problem when he was in TNA as well, which would be talked about soon enough. But they talked about Jeff like disappearing in the arena. He would go off into like these corners, the deepest, darkest corners of the arena just to get away. And no one can find him. No one knew where he was. And people started to get concerned for Jeff's health and well-being. So once Jeff left, Matt started to feel alone. And as a result, he was burnt out as well. But he started to have some problems. This was pretty revealing stuff because, Matt was, he was interviewed for the Jeff Hardy DVD that I talked about earlier, the one that came out in 2009. Matt was being interviewed for that documentary, and they show the footage here of them asking Matt questions. They ask him, can you talk about Jeff doing this or that, the high risks that he would take, all this other stuff, and Matt visibly starts to doze off, which is fucking crazy. And the person's like, Matt, like, are you okay? Like, Matt is like sleeping on set, sitting up, sleeping, which is insane. Christian, who was also involved in this documentary quite a bit as well, says, he would tell Christian he was fine when he wasn't, and Christian said the only real way that this is going to end is with you dying. That's how concerned he was for Matt's well-being at that point. Matt would like doze off in his food, and again, Big Show was also very concerned for Matt Hardy. Then Matt Hardy was finally released in late 2010 after much petitioning to be let go. And he did not look good either. In his final few appearances in the company, I've always been a big Matt Hardy fan. But it was around that point, he was facing, he was losing to Alberto Del Rio in a matter of minutes. And he kind of put on some weight, which is where the whole Fat Hardy thing came from. He wasn't, fat, but he had put on a couple extra pounds in his final few months with WWE. And it was very clear he just wasn't happy there anymore. That was around the time, which they also talked about here, that he was putting up weird-ass videos about him wanting to leave, and that it was Matthew Hardy, not Matt Hardy anymore, and that he was finally about to be set free by being let go in late 2010. It was some really weird shit. So also around that time, about a year earlier, of course, Jeff Hardy was fired. Not fired, but he left in September of or August of 2009. Soon after, he was jailed. He was arrested in September of 2009, literally 2 weeks after he left WWE. You see all the news articles here talking about Jeff being arrested, all the issues that he went through. He realized at that point that he was in a dark place. But despite that, he went to TNA in early 2010. And he even admits that in going to TNA, he thought it would be this huge, amazing thing. He would set the company on fire, make a huge difference. And he did make a difference. I mean, Jeff Hardy has always been, and still is, a huge name. Especially coming off his very hot WWE run from 08 to 09, for him to go to TNA was huge. I remember just thinking at the time, that's a big signing for TNA. I want him back in WWE. But for him to go to TNA is also pretty big, considering, the momentum that he had, the notoriety that he had. And he even admits here in the documentary, in the sit-down interview, he thought he would set the company on fire, and it didn't exactly work out that way. And even when they hired Jeff Hardy in early 2010, Eric Bischoff, who would also come into the company around that point, was worried about Jeff. Was worried. He knew he was a big name. He knew that he was a great get for the company. But he was also well aware of the issues that Jeff Hardy was having at the time with the drugs and the drinking and everything else. He was worried about what kind of Jeff Hardy they were going to get. Were they going to get the rock star Jeff Hardy, the Jeff Hardy that would go out there and give it his all every single night, or the Jeff Hardy that would become more of a liability for them? health-wise, and, become more of a fucking embarrassment for their company, which would exactly what would happen about a year later at Victory Road 2011. AJ Styles even recalled that no one could ever find Jeff Hardy. They would be about to go out there to do a match, and no one can find Jeff Hardy to rehearse the match or the promo. Jeff Hardy would be just gone in the arena. And Jeff realized at that point that he needed help, but in his mind, that he thought that he can get away with doing all this stupid shit, like doing the drugs and kind of getting away with half-assing all of his performances. He thought he can get away with it because he knew the company needed them, or that he thought that they needed them, that the company, that TNA needed Jeff Hardy, because they had some star power. They had a lot of star power, actually, in TNA at that point. The company was fucking in the shitter at that point. TNA was awful in late 2010. Oh my god, I turned off TNA for like a solid year from late 2009 to late 2010. That's how bad the company was. Wasn't too much better in 2011. Really wouldn't turn around until 2012, in my opinion. But anyway, that was really why he started to get away with so much. And TNA really wouldn't do anything about it. He would, show some events and stuff like that, but he realized in his mind that they needed him so he can get away with whatever he wanted. And Gregory Helms is also interviewed here, obviously a very good friend of both, or Shane Helms, whatever, a very good friend of both Matt and Jeff. He remembers partying with Matt one night, and Matt was all, as he said, all gimmicked up. He was doing the whole shtick that he would do on, like, YouTube and, like, clamoring for attention, and he realizes, like, hey, Matt, like, dude, we're at a party. It's just you and I. You don't need to be putting on this act for me. Like, what the fuck you doing, dude? So then they talk about what we've all waited for them to talk about, delve into in this documentary, that being the TNA Victory Road 2011 pay-per-view. Obviously a very infamous incident from that night when the main event did not go exactly as planned, to put it lightly, between Jeff Hardy and Sting for the TNA World Heavyweight Championship. And I should also note this too, Bruce Pritchard also went in depth about the incident. The very same week that this 24 special went up, he talked about it on Something Else to Wrestle With on Wednesday's show, because he was in the company at the time, and he was talking about how, like, he even saw Jeff being, like, dragged to the ring, which was fucking crazy. Like, Eric Bischoff talked about it here because he was also there when it happened. He went into the ring to deliver the news to Jeff Hardy that this match is not going the way that it should be. Like, this match is going to be stopped. It's going to be, it's going to be whatever. It's going to be postponed. We got to cut this thing short because you are in absolutely no condition to compete. So anyway, Sting says that, Sting, who was also interviewed for this thing, which was tremendous. I'm very happy they got Sting for this documentary. Sting says that he was excited to work with Jeff Hardy at Victory Road 2011. They had a match on TNA TV about a week and a half earlier, which is where I think Sting won the TNA title from Jeff Hardy. They had a good match on that show, but it was way too brief to really be anything of note. Then they had the rematch on this pay-per-view. You give people a taste of, just a small taste of what they're capable of on TV, and then deliver the real pay-per-view main event on pay-per-view a week and a half later. So that was the plan. So Sting was looking forward to working with Jeff. Jeff idolized Sting and all this other stuff. But again, Sting, Eric Bischoff, Bruce Pritchard, everyone backstage realized this guy is in no condition to compete. Eric Bischoff even said here that he saw Jeff being dragged to the ring, being dragged to gorilla position, whatever, being dragged to the stage area. And against his better judgment, he just let him go out there, when in reality he should have said it, to him, you're not going out there, you're all fucked up. Like, he realized that Jeff was not good, was not all right in the head at that point. And you can just kind of tell based off the fact that Jeff was, he was doing the heel stick at the time, the whole, like, Antichrist of professional wrestling. So you really couldn't tell the difference, but it was very obvious that there was something off about Jeff Hardy on that night. So Sting even admits after the match did not go the way that it was planned. Eric Bischoff came out before the bout to tell Jeff, he's hitting you with a Scorpion Death Drop. We're ending this thing right away. We cannot go on with this matchup because this is a fucking embarrassment. And you can see him mount, like, they put the subtitles up at the bottom of the screen, and it goes along. You can audibly hear Eric Bischoff say what he says here in the documentary, where he tells Jeff, Scorpion Death Drop, pin, and that's it, and you're out of here. Sting admits that the match, obviously, and ending in a minute, he wasn't angry, but he was disappointed. And that, again, very evident by the fact that Sting was walking back up the ramp after the match was over, and the crowd was chanting bullshit. And Sting just says, I know, I realize it, I'm disappointed too. He says something along those lines. So he goes, I know, very audibly to the crowd. AJ Styles, Jeff Hardy remembers, was very pissed off. I mean, it's also pretty apparent, too, because they ended up turning this into a storyline when Jeff came back to the company months later. And Jeff had to go around the locker room kind of asking for everyone's acceptance. And that was also a real-life thing, too. Bruce Prichard talked about it on his podcast a few days later, like I talked about, the Hardy Boys edition they put up on Wednesday. He was talking about how one of the stipulations in bringing back Jeff Hardy was that he had to go around and apologize to everyone in the locker room for what happened that night. And AJ was very emotional. They have a clip on the Impact Wrestling YouTube channel from the TV show of Jeff going up to AJ, attempting to apologize, and AJ just wants nothing of it. And he talks about, I've been here for years. You just come into the company and fuck up everything for everyone else. Just kind of making this company a joke. After all the hard work that I put into making this company what it is, you come on in here, you waltz in here, and just kind of ruin it for everyone else in the roster. And he says that in the altercation they had, the interaction they had on TNA TV back in late 2011. But he says the exact same thing here. So it's very obvious that whatever frustration AJ had at that point carried over to TV months later, and he kind of channeled the inner frustration and emotion, which was amazing. So Sting was disappointed. AJ Styles was pissed off. Samoa Joe was just sad. He said, if anything, that was the point where it became apparent that Jeff needed help. Jeff said, all the wrong in me died that night. That was kind of like my turning point. And he recalls Matt was getting worse while he started to get better. Jeff was taken off TV after that point. Obviously did not resurface until like September, I think, of 2011. So not for another 6 months would he be brought back to TV. And it wasn't talked about here, but Bruce Prichard said in his podcast, as I mentioned a few days later, that after Jeff was taken off TV and sent home, Jeff Hardy just went home. Bruce Prichard took over talent relations in May of that year after the whole rebranding of the company. And he basically asked them, what's the deal with Jeff Hardy? And no one knew. He just went home. And that was it. There was no consequences at that point for Jeff Hardy, despite the fact that he cost them a lot of, negative publicity and pay-per-view buys and a lot of money. Really ruined the reputation for a long, 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 long time. And no consequences were put into effect. No repercussions were made after the fact until Bruce Prichard came into power. He said, there's got to be some sort of consequence here. We can't just let him get off the hook. We just can't allow that to happen. I mean, this guy really fucked things up for a lot of people. We just can't let him get off with a slap on the wrist. It would make no sense. He didn't really say I don't remember him saying what the actual consequence was. Maybe a fine. And now again, he was taken off of TV until September of that year. Like I said, I know he had to go around the locker room apologizing to people, but still, that's pretty intense stuff here. This is very, very real, and they could not have done this doc without the TNA footage in the interviews with former TNA stars, AJ Styles, Samoa Joe, Sting, Eric Bischoff. They got a lot of great interviews for this thing. So anyway, like I said, while Jeff started to get better in the summer of 2011, Matt was just getting worse. He was putting up all these crazy videos just to attract attention. And Helms even went up to him like, what the fuck you doing? He put up this one video. I remember watching it at that point. It was in late August of 2011. Matt put up this video on YouTube. Basically, it was like a suicide note. And he was doing it just for attention. He was all about the attention. And he was doing it just for retweets. He's like, hey, look at all these retweets I'm getting. And Helms was like, who gives a shit about the fucking retweets? What are you doing, dude? You're going off the deep end here. Matt admitted that he knew that he had to change, and it was around this point that him and Jeff weren't super close, because Jeff was going through his problems, Matt was going through his problems. Rebby Hardy, his girlfriend at the time and wife now, was afraid that he was going to die. But yeah, Matt even admitted that he had to go cold turkey with all the pain pills he was going at that point. So he got off all the pain pills, and then someone suggested something to him, hey, you should be taking this instead. The worst advice he has ever taken, he admitted. He said it was even worse than the pain pills. It was like taking bath salts. And that was when he got in all these car crashes and the DUIs and all these other issues that he had run into problems with around that point. So an intervention from Matt was made between Rebby Hardy, Rebby Sky, whatever, Gregory Helms, Shane Helms, and all these other people. Matt, you need to get your shit together. You need to get help. So she basically forced him to get help. He went to rehab in late 2011. He was kicked out of rehab on the first try, which was never really talked about until, I think I remember reading at that time, wasn't he drinking I don't remember exactly. Like Matt said here, like he was in rehab and he was brought over to like someone's cell and they had fucking like whiskey in the ceiling. So he had to know he had to go somewhere where he would not be tempted to drink if it was available, if it was there for him. But I remember reading like at that time, this might have been a rumor, that he was drinking like Listerine, that he had like Listerine on his breath, which is basically alcohol, so he couldn't be doing that, like he couldn't be drinking that. I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was something along those lines, or in so many words, it got him kicked out of rehab on the first try, because he was drinking whiskey there, apparently. So he re-entered rehab. At the same time, Jeff started his 10-day jail sentence for the issues, you know, the arrest that he had from the year prior. Did the 10-day jail sentence. 2 weeks after Matt went back into rehab, he thought he was going to go crazy. Like, you would get an hour of free time to watch TV, but beyond that, you were in the cell for 23 hours a day. So he did some reading, or he did some writing, rather, and he was like, this is a feeling I never want to experience again. So it was really like this eye-opening experience for Jeff Hardy. Matt, on the other hand, got back on track starting in December of 2011. He said he hadn't taken anything since. He hasn't taken anything since that point after going back to rehab at the tail end of 2011. And he said he can't even imagine going back to doing the lifestyle that he was living before because of the kids that he has now. Because of Wolfgang and Maxwell. Those are their actual names, too, Wolfgang and Maxwell. But he's like, yeah, being a father changed me for the better, 100%. And he credits Rebby for getting his shit together, too. She played a very pivotal role in getting Matt back on track. And, you know, she was there for him when, you know, not that she was going to leave him, but, like, she was like, you're going to either die or you're going to get better. So you got to choose one of the two. And she was there for him when he needed the help that he desperately needed at that point in time. So they talk about being a father was very influential for Matt and getting better, and it also helped out Jeff Hardy, who had 2 kids soon after the fact, and now he has 2 daughters. Matt has 2 boys. He named his daughter after his mother, Ruby, and we never really hear much about their mom. They did talk about their mom a little bit here. I think their dad is still alive, if I'm not mistaken. I think Papa Hardy is still alive, unless I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure he still is. Ruby passed away apparently in like the 80s, so they weren't too old when she passed away, but they talked about how their mom didn't drink, their mom didn't smoke, and she was a huge positive influence on both of them. And also in their recovery and the fact that, you know, she probably wouldn't be proud of the fact that they were doing all this shit, and which is why they, you know, part of the reason why they stopped many years later. Matt Hardy returned to TNA in 2014. He was kind of worried at first, but he was confident that he had matured, he had grown as a performer, and he was ready to go, you know, be back on TV. And he was also in Ring of Honor at that point. He didn't talk about that, but he didn't really need to. I mean, the Ring of Honor run was great, and they would talk about Ring of Honor a little bit later on before they went back to WWE. But Matt Hardy was in Ring of Honor for a little bit, from like 2012 to like 2014. He was in there for a while. But he said he played with being broken. Now, they don't talk about Matt being back with Jeff, tag teaming in 2014, 2015. They immediately transitioned into the talk about him being broken. Played with being broken and kind of how, when he was going crazy, he had rendered himself obsolete, out of the game, he said, and it was during his downward spiral. So he kind of tapped into those feelings and made it into an on-air character. Jeff calls Matt a genius for the character. He calls Matt a genius for creating this broken persona, the broken universe. They talk all about Final Deletion, and how after the fact, Twitter blew up during it, and they show all the footage from Final Deletion. By the way, I forgot to mention it, but yeah, they show all the footage from Final Deletion, from Victory Road, from Jeff coming into TNA, all this other stuff. Like, they show a lot of stuff from their TNA time, which was crazy. All from the GWN, all from the Global Wrestling Network, which is really cool to have that partnership now. But yeah, people were like, this is either the greatest thing ever, or it's the dumbest shit I've ever seen. And I think I was in the dumbest shit I've ever seen category at first, but it was right around Final Deletion where I'm like, wow, this is amazing. Like, the guy's a genius. Drew McIntyre was even interviewed for this thing because he was the TNA champion at that point in time. And he even said, like, I found it difficult to follow because I was the TNA world champion, but there really wasn't anything I could do to follow this act because they were a hot act at that point. And Matt and Jeff, as a result, Jeff talks about that they became a lot closer and they were having a lot of fun with the characters. And it reminded them of when they were kids. Kind of filming videos and doing all the stupid stuff and just having fun, like I said earlier. That was really the core of it. And it helped rebuild the reputation as well within the wrestling world as 2 acts that can reinvent themselves and aren't stagnant or stale, and they're not, just another two old-timers coming back for a paycheck. They can continue to reinvent themselves and remain relevant. So it was around this time that Matt was like legit having dreams of returning to WWE. And it was around that time as well where they were speaking with Michael Hayes and Vince McMahon, kind of feeling out any interest from WWE, if there was any interest from WWE for them to come back. They didn't talk about their falling out with TNA. They didn't really need to. I know they talked about leaving TNA. They just mentioned leaving TNA. They didn't mention the fact that they had the whole falling out. They didn't really need to. Like, why? I mean, they're on good terms now, and they may do. Like, maybe if Matt and Jeff weren't, maybe if they weren't on good terms with TNA still, and they were still having problems and going back and forth with them, maybe that would be an issue. But no longer. I think they buried that hatchet late last year, so, like, why even bother bringing up the fact that they were on bad terms with Impact for a long time, and that was what led to their departure in early 2017. But anyway, they were signed, sealed, and delivered for WWE, like, by early March, by, like, soon after they had left TNA, like, within a week. Like, I know there were reports from, like, Pro Wrestling Sheet around that point that they were signed to WWE, but no one was really certain, just because soon after, like, immediately after, like, less than a week after returning to TNA, after leaving TNA, I should say, less than a week after the fact, they went to Ring of Honor, and they won the World Tag Team titles. So they really, like, started to make people think that they weren't going back to WWE. Even Jeff talks about it. They show footage of their Ring of Honor run and stuff like that, which is awesome. But they talk about, like, wanting to swerve people. People thought, they're definitely coming back for WrestleMania, but they took a picture at the airport, and they were like, maybe they're not coming back to WWE. Like, Jeff was saying all this stuff in interviews about, wanting to go do a Rock tour and wanting to wrestle for Ring of Honor for a few more months. Like, they have no real plans or interest to return to WWE. So they do go back to WWE, obviously. They wait in a bus the day of WrestleMania. Everyone embraced them during their return. They had Big Show backstage, AJ Styles, Vince McMahon, and Vince McMahon sitting at Gorilla is like, "Welcome home, guys. Welcome home, boys. Welcome home, Jeff," when they're about to go out. And they're really, really nervous. Michael Hayes just goes, "Just breathe. Breathe. You've done this a million times. This time is going to be no different." So they go out there and get this amazing pop. I mean, I talked about it a million times. I'll talk about it a million more times. But easily the greatest moment I've ever experienced as a wrestling fan and being there live to see the return to WWE of the Hardy Boys. Greatest pop I've ever heard. Greatest thing I've ever been a part of. Still my pinned tweet on Twitter from April 2nd, 2017. And I don't think that'll ever change. Just being there for it was really something special, to say the least. Matt called it an exhilarating moment, and while they're showing the footage of them making their way down to the ring, and they play Live in the Moment by Portugal the Man, which is like whole Jeff Hardy's catchphrase, so it's fitting they played that song during this point of the documentary. They showed the footage of them coming back, getting the pop, crowd going crazy, winning the Raw Tag Team titles, and just being so happy. And we hear Rebby here talk about how, like, it almost made her, like, it did make her cry, seeing Matt go down the ramp, and you see that shot, and it got me really emotional too. You see the shot of Matt walking down the ramp, and he's got this huge smile on his face after, before the match and during the match and winning the Raw Tag Team titles, and she was so happy to see Matt so happy, and he'd never seen him so happy in his life. Coming back to WWE, like, it's emotional because it's such a big moment, and it's very obvious that it meant a lot to him. I see Matt tweeting about it all the time, even a year after the fact, that WrestleMania moment even existed. It was so cool to see him so happy to be back. And they go backstage, and Big Show greets him, and AJ Styles greet him. They were all surprised, like no one really knew what the hell was going on. They were all so happy to see him. Matt talks about being appreciative of that moment, and that it kind of marked them being ready to take on this new journey with WWE. And that's not it. They don't end the documentary at their return to WrestleMania. That is far from it. There is still like 10 to 15 minutes left of the documentary from that point forward. So they team up for a little bit as the Raw Tag Team Champions. They drop the belt soon after. Jeff gets hurt. He tears his rotator cuff in September of 2017. And Matt's like, what does this mean for me? So Matt realizes that this could be an opportunity to do my own thing. And Matt even says that Matt's like, he acts like Vince for a second. It's like, what is this shit? But he's like, no, Vince was happy with the fact that he was taking chances with this broken character in TNA. So he kind of wanted him to do something similar in WWE. So Matt even admits that he had been thinking about doing something along the lines of Ultimate Deletion since signing with WWE. Not even WrestleMania 33, but like since they signed a few weeks earlier, that he had always dreamed of doing something similar to Final Deletion in WWE from that point. And he really desperately wanted it to be good. And by all accounts, all things considered, it was a success by Matt's in Matt's eyes. And I would agree. I got a lot of buzz. It was the main event of Raw that night. And it wasn't on Hulu, which kind of pissed me off, but nonetheless, I know Jason couldn't see it, but nonetheless, a lot of people were talking about it. By WWE standards, it was very, very good. Maybe not as good as Final Deletion, but I really, really enjoyed it. So anyway, that happens, and 2 days after they filmed the Final Deletion or Ultimate Deletion, whatever, Jeff got arrested for a DUI. And I'm very happy they mentioned this, because you can't do a documentary. You can't do a documentary on the rise and fall and the rise again of the Hardy Boys and all their issues without mentioning Jeff's most recent issue and having a DUI. It took place, like I said, 2 days after they filmed Ultimate Deletion back in March of 2018, just a few months ago. Matt even admits he didn't talk to Jeff for like over 24 hours because he was so mad at Jeff for what he did for kind of fucking up their opportunity and all this other stuff. Like, you had this opportunity to, he was in Final Deletion. They didn't edit Jeff out, which was cool. But he's like, we have so much momentum right now. Like, why would you mess this up for us? Blah, blah, blah. But, he got over it. He said he's always there for his brother. He still worries about his brother, but he knows he can get through it. Jeff talks about going to classes twice a week, and he says he'll be good. And that, it's just kind of a minor bump in the road. He admitted to his fuck up. He's like, I fucked up. I'm sorry. Shouldn't have done it. I was drinking and driving. And Matt says that, this incident could help him get even more in check. You can't have a great life without having some bumps in the road as well. So he feels that it could have been a blessing in disguise, in so many words, for Jeff Hardy. So we see footage of Jeff training at the Performance Center to get ready for his in-ring return, which he does. He does return to the ring the night after WrestleMania, the very next night, after Matt wins the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal at WrestleMania. He takes it all in. He feels humbled by the moment to win that Battle Royal at WrestleMania. But yeah, Jeff returns to Raw the very next night. He says his shoulder feels great. He feels great to be back. They play Kids by One Republic, and they talk about being happy to have made it through the dark days. And Matt says life is not perfect. All humans make mistakes, but it's never too late to come back. And then they show highlights of their return to WWE and growing up and their first run with WWE and the broken stuff and all these other things. Everything that was the Hardy Boys they show in the final few minutes of this documentary in this amazing highlight reel. This was amazing. I really, really, really enjoyed this 24. It might be my new favorite WWE 24 special on the network. There's a lot of great ones. You really can't go wrong with any of them. There's so many. And I've talked about so many here on the network. They had the one on Kurt Angle. They had the one on Goldberg last year. The Finn Balor one was also great. They had the one on Seth Rollins a few years ago. Those are all awesome. They're all very, very enjoyable. But just maybe for me personally, having been there throughout the entire journey for the Hardy Boys, from their issues back in late 2011, 2012, to following them through TNA, and now back in WWE, being there for the return, it's really hit home on many, many levels. So it's got to be, I would have to go back and watch the other ones, but this very well might be my favorite WWE 24 to date. That's how good this one was. But yeah, I'd give it 2 thumbs up. I've seen all the rave reviews and all the major praise on the Twitter machine for this documentary, and rightfully so, because it's really, really fucking good. So I know this was a lengthy review, but it's a lengthy documentary. It's about an hour in length. It's just about an hour, approximately 57 minutes, but it's so worth your time. The hour just flies by. They talk about everything you would want them to talk about in great detail. The TNA footage is fascinating as well, which, again, like I said earlier, you cannot have done this documentary without that stuff, or the interviews with Sting and AJ Styles and Samoa Joe and Eric Bischoff. I really, really enjoyed it. So again, check this out. It is must-see viewing. The WWE 24 special, Woken, the Hardy Boys, now on the network. So check it out under the Originals tab. And whatever airs on the network this week, I'm not sure if anything can ever top this, but whatever airs this on the network this coming week, after Raw on Monday, if anything. If not, I'll just talk about something else. I'll watch something else on the network and review it for Friday. I will talk about a network and chill this coming Friday. Hopefully we can get back on schedule with like the posting schedule, because I try to have network and chill up on Mondays and on Fridays, but this past week was so fucking crazy. It kind of got all, messed up and whatever. But yeah, tomorrow, Monday, I should have my review up of Total Bellas airing tonight, Sunday night. So stay tuned for that. I should have that up on Monday morning, hopefully. And that's about it, guys. Be sure to like this video, drop a comment, share the video, and subscribe to the channel for more daily content. We will be back tomorrow with a new Network and Chill, so stay tuned for that. Until then, guys, have a great rest of your weekend. I'm Graham Jason Matthews. Stay woken, and I'll catch your ass down the road.